And hello, everybody. Welcome to the Weekday Warriors of Wrestling for Friday, April 16, 2021. You guys may be hearing this on Saturday, April 17th, but I'm Eric Clancy. Patrick Kelly's here. We have not been with you guys for a few weeks. It's been a few busy weeks, but we are back ready to chat Wrestlemania, ready to talk Dynamite in the first post Wednesday Night Wars show. We're ready to see how much both of us like King Kong versus Godzilla, because I'm sorry, Godzilla versus Kong is the name of the film, because we actually haven't talked about that not backstage, but off the show. We haven't talked about that.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. A lot of good stuff to get through.
Yeah. Let's start right there, Patrick. What did you think? Let's go right into Godzilla versus Kong. What did you think?
The movie delivered exactly what it promised. And
Yeah.
to that end, I think it's very entertaining. I think it's a lot of fun. There's not a whole lot of substance to the movie, but if you're like me and you're a fan of Godzilla and you're a fan of King Kong and you've been watching these monsters virtually for your entire life and you just want to see them fight, I think the movie delivered exactly on what it promised. And like all the other MonsterVerse films, it does a really good job of making the monsters awesome, which is what faults, and most of these MonsterVerse movies have had faults, but the one thing that they've all done really, really well is that they make the monsters awesome, and this movie is no exception.
Yeah, I actually, so I liked it from a few perspectives. First of all, like Patrick said, I agree. It's this big dumb monster movie, but that's kind of what you're going for when you go into Godzilla versus Kong, I liked it a lot. I don't know if so of the four MonsterVerse films, I think 2014 Godzilla is my least favorite because there's hardly any Godzilla. Aaron Taylor Johnson is so boring. So is Elizabeth Olsen. Bryan Cranston is not in that movie at all. I think the Mutos are boring monsters. I thought, and I'm a Godzilla guy, so the fact that I'm telling you that I thought that Skull Island was better than that is like almost sacrilege. But I thought it was a much better movie. It had better monster fights. It had more heart. It had a better cast. But I really liked King of the Monsters. I thought that was great and really cool. And I thought this was like very much in the same vein. And it did something that like probably not since Marvel. I mean, I'm not saying they do it as well as the MCU, but like not since Marvel has a interconnected film universe like felt like it was really like the idea that like, okay, so Kong's got his movies off to the side, Godzilla's had his movies, like, oh, there's these, they've got Ghidorah's head, we established that from the previous movie, controlling Mechagodzilla with like telekinetic power. So like that was like, I thought it was a cool culmination of everything, and I liked it a lot because of that reason. I thought the fights were cool. I thought the right monster won, which that was always my problem with the 63 one as a kid. I was such a big Godzilla fan, and I felt it was so like, I mean, I didn't say this at the time, but I think this is what was in my heart. I was like, it feels like xenophobic. It feels like they're like, we're making the American monster win because we want Americans to watch this movie. And I'm like, but I like the Japanese monster,
Well, and there's a whole behind the scenes thing about that, but keep in mind with that, and I'm more of a Godzilla guy too, but back in 1962, Kong was the much bigger star at that time.
Yeah.
And that movie was the one that made Godzilla into a franchise player that he is today.
Yeah. So I thought it was fun. So like, some people that listen to the show like the movie talk. So I thought we'd chat about it because you and I are both such big Godzilla fans.
Mhm.
Like seriously, Patrick and I met. We've been doing the shows for 20. Not 20. We've been doing the show for 16 years now. Not in the current format, of course, but like whether it was on a website, whether it was on Blog Talk Radio, whether it was on Talk Show, we've been doing it for like ever. And we of course we're like, oh hey, we have similar wrestling opinions. This could be really fun. And like midway through, we both like, this is before like Reddit and like geekdom was like so concentrated, and we were like, oh, you're a Godzilla fan, because you didn't really meet too many Godzilla fans. Like you can meet another wrestling fan, and we all know how hard that is, but they're very rarely are you like, hey, I have an opinion on Godzilla versus the sea monster, which we do. But so yeah, that's always I always thought that was funny that like you were like, neither of us are really like surface level Godzilla fans. Like we saw a few, like Patrick and I could both tell you, like like all the movies in the Heisei era and the Showa era, and like our thoughts on the Millennial series. Like we know a fair amount of stuff about Godzilla. So it's
Yeah, it's one of those things I grew up with, and I think it's growing up in that like stage in that era of cable television where there would always be a Godzilla movie marathon around.
on
And
TNT, Monster Vision.
NT used to do them, Sci-Fi Channel used to do them. It was always delightful. And I remember skimming through the TV guides. Remember when those were a thing?
Yeah.
And looking for I've often called the Godzilla series the greatest scavenger hunt that I ever undertook in my entire life, because it was a quest to see all of them. And the TV guide was a very useful tool to accomplishing that.
Yeah, because I think you probably went through, I think we're like, and so you probably had the same problem I did. And that is, you'd find these movies, and first of all, they weren't all available in video stores. Like you'd have Godzilla, you'd have Godzilla Raids Again, or whatever. Like I know there's like 7 names on that thing. You'd have Godzilla versus Kong, you'd have Godzilla versus the Thing, and then maybe you'd see like Godzilla versus Gigan, and like you'd see some of the Showa stuff, and then they would have them on TV, so you tape them on TV. But the problem with doing that was there are like 3 to 4 different names for every Godzilla movie. Like not every Godzilla movie, but like Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla is also Godzilla versus the Astro Monster. It's also Godzilla versus the Bionic Monster. And like I would see those on TV, and I was a kid and I was stupid, and I didn't realize like I thought like, oh, adult, they didn't make a bunch. These are all different movies, not really realizing there are different markets and there's different things that people tested to get something over with a particular audience. But so I would be like, oh, like there's all these movies I haven't seen. In reality, I'd seen most of them. There was just like Godzilla versus a sea monster and Godzilla versus Ebirah is the same movie, So like it's I had that problem. And then Patrick, do you remember in like 1993 or 4, you started hearing about new Godzilla movies that were like being released in the theaters? And like if you went to like a good movie store, I'm talking like a Suncoast in the mall, and like you could find some like, oh, Godzilla versus Biollante, you're like, oh, there's a Godzilla movie after Godzilla 1995, because that was like, I had that one because that one came out in American theaters, but then I'm like, there's a whole series after this.
Yeah. I remember when I first got on AOL, so this would have been 96, and some of these movies had been covered in the mainstream news media. Like I know when Godzilla was killed off in Godzilla vs. Destroyer, there were news stories about it. But I didn't see those. So I was blissfully ignorant to the existence of most of the 90s Godzilla films, the ones after Godzilla versus Biollante. So imagine how both my surprise and how pissed off I was when I go online and I find out that there's 5 more Godzilla movies I've never seen.
Yeah. And it's like Godzilla versus Space Godzilla. And you're like, what?
Do you remember the Godzilla toy line from Trendmasters?
Yes, I had. Is that the one where they made sounds?
Yes.
Yes, I had those. So I had Godzilla, who had like kind of a cute little like dog face almost. I had Space Godzilla, who was like creepy. I had Rodan, and I had Mothra.
Okay, I bring it up because that toy line was a clue to that there were other movies, but
yes,
these movies weren't being released in the States. So I didn't know that. I thought that Space Godzilla was an invention of the toy line just to sell toys. I had no idea that he was actually in a movie. So again, that early internet phase of discovery, it was both exciting and aggravating all at the same time, because it's like, damn, the scavenger hunt's not over.
Yeah. Do you remember the Super Nintendo game Super Godzilla?
Yep, sure do.
Yeah, so that was, like you said, that toy line was a clue. The game was a clue too, because I remember like, so if you're like in your mid-30s and old as shit like we are, you would go to the video rental store every week. Like everybody did that because it was awesome and great. And you would get movies or you get video games. And I saw that game, and I, for most of my life, had only been exposed to Godzilla and Godzilla 2 on NES, which are drastically different games. I like them both for different reasons. I know people don't like them for many reasons. That's fine. But and Godzilla, Super Godzilla was out, and I'm like, oh my God, this is great. and you play the game and you fight King Ghidorah in the first level. I'm like, whoa, King Ghidorah in the first level, because he was always like the ultimate bad guy. And you beat him, and then you fight Mecha King Ghidorah, and I'm like, holy shit, what is this? And because I had never heard of the Godzilla versus King Ghidorah, the actual movie from 1991. And then you fight Mecha Godzilla. I'm like, oh yeah. And then you fight fucking Biollante, which, if you are not a Godzilla fan listening to this, which I think is most people, is a giant tyrannosaur meat-eating plant, and like with also the soul of a girl in it. And it's and I'm like, what the fuck is this? And then I think you fight Batra, and I'm like, is that
Yes.
like Mothra? And I don't think Space Godzilla's in that game, is he?
Technically, no, but the Super Godzilla design was the inspiration for Space Godzilla.
Yeah, because there's Mothra and there's Batra. Bagon is the final guy, who was not in any movie, but was considered to be the Destroyer role in Godzilla versus Destroyer.
Yeah, Bagon was a weird case where he was a monster that was utilized in, like, and by the way, if you've ever read the history of Godzilla movies that didn't get made, it's really fascinating. I highly recommend it. John LeMay's book series about the history of Japanese giant monsters covers that, and it's super fascinating. But you find when you read through the history of the Godzilla films that didn't get made, poor Bagon got written into like 10 scripts, and all of them got scrapped.
Yeah. Yeah, wasn't he going to be in Godzilla 2000 as well until they went with Orga?
Possibly. The big one that I know he was supposed to be in, he was supposed to fight Mothra in a Mothra standalone film.
Oh, yeah.
And then that got scrapped. And then they were like, oh, let's do Godzilla versus, I think it was Gigamoth or something like that. And then that got scrapped. And they basically like turned what became Godzilla versus Mothra in 92 was like a Frankenstein script of like the Mothra movie and the Godzilla movie.
But then they made those 3 Mothra films that I've never seen.
Yeah, I have seen them. You're fine.
Yeah.
They're kids' movies. They're cute little kids' movies. Is the best way to describe it.
I was always, because when I looked up stuff and they're like, there's a character called Death Ghidorah. I'm like, whoa, what the fuck? I need to see that.
Yeah, there's some neat stuff in there, but it is largely geared towards children.
Yeah. As we act like us as 30-something adults are like, these giant monster movies are for children, but the ones that we like are.
Yeah, and while I polish off my monocle and talk about the value of Godzilla versus the Smog Monster.
Yeah.
Unironically, one of my favorites, by the way.
You know what? Fun fact, never seen that movie, ever.
You'll never forget it.
It's like a 70s like acid trip, right?
Oh, yes, exactly. That's the best way to describe it.
I've read all about it, but I was never able to tape it. I mean, I could probably buy it now. Like I could find we're in the age of all pop culture existing at once, so I could probably find it. But when I was watching all Godzilla films, that's the only Godzilla movie I've never seen, I think.
Wow, it's a bit notorious among fans because some fans hate how wacky it is. But I'm like, dude, it's so it's this weird mishmash of like 70s culture and comedy and horror. There's some legitimately like horrifying scenes in that movie.
Yeah.
But it's all like thrown together in this weird like experience. There's no Godzilla film quite like it. And that's one of the reasons I like it so much.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're like 15 minutes in and we haven't talked any wrestling. So let's talk wrestling.
Let's do it.
WrestleMania was this weekend. It was another 2-night WrestleMania, which I have to say I'm super disappointed that the Dallas one next year, 38, is going to be a one-nighter, it seems, which I think is a mistake because, I mean, Patrick, regardless of, I didn't love these shows, so I'm not going to say I did, and I didn't love last year's shows, but holy shit, do these things move way quicker than a one-night 7-hour WrestleMania show does.
And this is something that we suggested in recent years before COVID. It was like they should really, if they're going to make Mania this long, they should consider breaking it up into 2 nights. And I'll go this far with it. I just finished watching WrestleMania yesterday. I hadn't watched it the night or as it was airing. I just got caught up on it yesterday. I'll say this. I enjoyed WrestleMania more than I did the 2-night NXT TakeOver special because it felt quicker. It was longer than NXT, but it felt quicker paced, and it was a lot more digestible than the NXT show was, at least in my opinion.
Yeah. So let's get our major thoughts out of the way. So I thought night 1 was by far better than night 2.
I would agree with that. Because
I
the
thought,
worst match of the weekend, well, there are other reasons, but the worst match of the weekend was clearly a night 2. But we'll get there when we get there.
oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah. Yeah, so night 1, I thought it was actually a really fun show. Now that I'm looking down, like if you take out the Braun Strowman thing and the in the tag turmoil match, I thought it was actually a pretty fun show, believe it or not. I thought Ashley and Drew, and it was really cool to see wrestling in front of people. I thought the fans were by far the MVP. They weren't even a great crowd, but the fact that they existed was cool. I also thought it was really weird that they were like, we're not going to run this entire stadium, but we're going to have everybody sitting next to each other. And like, why didn't you just like open up the whole thing and spread them out? Like, why didn't you just run the whole stadium then?
Great question. I don't know.
Yeah, it just seems weird and counterintuitive. But so we had Lashley and McIntyre for the title. I thought this was fine. I didn't love it, but it did have a big match feel. I will say this: there was one 20-minute match on this show, on both of these shows, and I thought that was great because there is a weird ass obsession these days that. And the wrestlers will be like, well, I can go 60 minutes. I can go 47 minutes. Well, most wrestlers can't because if we're being honest, you can't really hold someone's attention for that long. I mean, certain people can do it. There are people that can. Okada and Kenny Omega have done it. Like Shawn Michaels can do it. Ric Flair did in the 80s. Like there are people that can, but most people can't. And like just because they're doing moves and stuff and people are chanting this is awesome doesn't actually mean the vast majority of people think it's awesome. So
and those hour-long matches happened on cards where generally happened on cards where the rest of the matches weren't also 20 minutes and 30 minutes long.
Yeah, and I just find it so weird in an era where everybody's admitting that attention spans are getting shorter and entertainment is getting more bite-sized and people are more understanding of how the human attention span works, that they're like, hey, let's make everything longer than it's ever been before. And to me, that's just so counterintuitive. You look at the Attitude Era, and I'm not saying the Attitude Era is perfect, and I'm not saying like do everything like that, but like those are like 8-minute matches, 9-minute matches. And for the most part, that's kind of what wrestling matches should be. UFC fights don't last for like 45 minutes. People see a guy get his ass kicked and they're like, oh, cool. You know, it doesn't have to always be this epic struggle between like people. I understand it's WrestleMania and you do want to have one of those epic struggles, and I think you should. But this is like an every card problem. So I was happy to see the length of the matches. I thought they were pretty good for the most part. Bobby Lashley and Drew McIntyre got 18 minutes. I think that's good. So yeah, overall I thought that was a really cool. I thought that was a really smart decision by the company.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons WrestleMania felt so fast paced, where it was like, okay, it's easy breezy viewing, and no match that I can think of really overstayed its welcome.
Yeah.
That maybe the tag team turmoil match.
Yeah, this thing sucked. Like it was just like I don't know. It felt like Diva era stuff. Like Mandy Rose and Dana Brooke came out, and Dana Brooke's boobs kept popping out, or Mandy's, I can't remember. And like it was just like I don't know. It was weird. It was I don't know. It was such a weird match. It felt like Ruby Riott was the only person that was good in this thing. Like Natalia's like, Tamina, get out. Has to do a splash so we can honor you at WrestleMania for your dad killing someone or something. Like I don't like. I just thought it was a bad match.
Yeah, it was one of those, and I like tag team turmoil matches. The Attitude Era used to do them a lot, and I always thought it was like a nice way to showcase A, our tag division has depth, and B, a nice way to get guys on the card and get them a payday. But this was just like I lost track of who was who, and I didn't care, and they didn't hold my attention at all. It was a very poorly laid out match.
Also, why did they break up the Iconics if they were just going to put Billy Kay with Carmella in another tag team, and then they just released them both anyway? Like, what the fuck was the point?
Great question. I don't have an answer for that.
Awesome. Okay, so next was, I think, maybe my second favorite match of the night. It was Cesaro and Seth Rollins. And I thought this was, like, some people are like, this should have gone a little bit longer. I thought it was fine. I thought it moved really well. I thought, and take in mind, I don't watch WWE on a weekly basis, so I don't know what any of these stories are. But I mean, it's WWE. It's not like James Joyce where I need to like deep dive into this shit. But I got the story quickly. I thought Seth Rollins's like political ad was really funny, and I laughed really hard when they were like, paid for by friends of Seth Rollins. This is not supported by Seth Rollins in any way, shape, or form. That made me crack up. I thought it was a good match. I thought it moved well, and it was cool. I liked it. It was fun. It was a good, like, 10-minute match.
Yeah, we've talked about this in, again, recent WrestleManias. WrestleMania has been missing matches like this, where it's just a good, solid undercard match to help elevate somebody or tell us a simple story.
Yeah.
Where most WrestleMania matches pre-COVID, in like kind of the modern era, it's been long-ass main events starring the part-timers like Undertaker, Triple H, and those guys, and a bunch of multi-man matches where a bunch of people get lost in the shuffle. And because of that, you have a bunch of guys like Cesaro, like Dolph Ziggler, like John Morrison, who have very rarely gotten a chance to shine at WrestleMania. And they've said it leading into this. This is Cesaro's first one-on-one WrestleMania match in 10 years, which is, to me, absurd. But the two-night format allows for matches like this, and it's great. And I thought it was a really solid match, and I was happy to see Cesaro go over.
Yeah. Then we had a tag team title match that I thought was really fun and really well done. It was AJ Styles and Omos against the New Day. And I thought this was so simple and so good. And there was, there's a lot of problems with tag team wrestling that I have with tag team wrestling. And that's mostly all tag matches tell the same story. Like the heels beat up the babyface, and then the babyface hot tags, and then either the heels cheat to win or the babyface does whatever. This was a simple story, and it wasn't like groundbreaking psychology, but they did it really well and they committed to it. The story that everybody got was that we don't want Omos to get in the ring. We want to beat AJ Styles. We want to use our superior tag team knowledge to defeat him and make sure that big man doesn't get in the ring. And the danger to a match is like this is what happens is that if Omos gets in the ring and then the New Day beats him, or AJ comes in and just loses or whatever, then like the whole thing's been for naught. Like the question is this match is, can he get in the ring? And if so, is he going to destroy everybody? And the answer was yes. He got tagged in, he killed them, and he won the match. And that was it. So they've now established that this guy, when he gets in the ring, will kill you. And he looked really good. The New Day did a great job of making him look good. There's a nice dynamic between him and AJ as like, like that, those two dogs on the Mel Blanc cartoons were like, let me at him. But I thought this was great. I thought it was really like simple and good, and it made a lot of sense.
I'll be honest, this was probably my favorite match of both nights because I just enjoyed how simple the booking was. And this is a perfect example of not every match needs to steal the show or be the most grand finisher fest kick out action-packed match ever. You just got to tell a simple story that people understood. And this match did it in spades. It was wonderfully well done, and they got a guy over in the process. And granted, almost they probably kept his stuff simple because he's probably still green as goose shit, but they hit it. It reminded me a lot of like Zeus back in '89, where that guy, he's an actor, he's not a wrestler. In-ring talent is almost zero, but they presented him in a way that worked, that got him over and made him feel like a threat. And they did the same here for Omos, and it worked beautifully, and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I would much rather have a guy do simple stuff and get it right than I would have a guy like Max Caster did the other day on Dynamite, or a few weeks ago on Dynamite, where he did like 800 fuck ups. And I'm like, I'd rather just do what you can and do it correctly. Don't like try to go crazy and like look like an idiot.
Yep.
I like this. What I didn't like was the next match, which was Braun Strowman versus Shane McMahon, because God forbid Shane McMahon goes a year without having a WrestleMania match. This guy has got to be on every fucking show, and he apparently is getting people over. Holy shit, where to start with this thing? Like Shane McMahon is like punching Braun Strowman out, and we're supposed to believe it. I don't care. And then people are like, oh, well, Jackson Riker and Elias hit him beforehand. I don't care if they ran him over with a truck. I don't believe Shane McMahon and his awful punches that like you've been wrestling adjacent for like forever since you were in the womb, and you can't get decent punches. Like, talk to some of these Memphis guys. It was just so bad, and it's just like, oh, you couldn't have had like Ali get thrown off the top. He could have done that. Like it was so bad.
I don't think I dislike this as much as you did. I understand the problems with Shane McMahon. I know you feel this way too, but I prefer Shane back in like 2000 when he was treated like a wimp and like a coward, and then he would get beat up and it would be satisfying. That was the Shane that I prefer. But here, like this match did have a couple of cool visuals, like Braun tearing through the cage wall and
Yes.
Shane getting thrown off the top of the cage. So there was some stuff that happened in a, you know, build-up was lame. Some of the stuff with Shane is kind of lame and is way tired and overplayed at this point, but they managed to get out of it largely unscathed, all things considered.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you put it on the faulty premise that it needed to happen in the first place, which it didn't.
Sure.
So, I mean, yes, him ripping the cage was objectively cool. Like throwing off, like that's a cool spot. But like, I didn't need to see this shit, and it was like dumb. And like, I have to pretend that Shane McMahon can hurt Braun Strowman with punches for a company that's all like, we're about storytelling, and like they certainly didn't care about believability there. So, yeah, I did not like this. Bad Bunny and Damian Priest defeated the Miz and Morrison, and you know, I don't want to like gush over Bad Bunny like so many people were, but the dude like sold really well and like understood the basic storytelling of a match that most wrestlers don't. So like, I'm going to give him credit for that. I'm not going to say like, oh, he did a Canadian Destroyer. Like that was John Morrison doing the Canadian Destroyer,
They
but like
gave him the right spots where
Yeah.
Miz and Morrison basically did all the work, which is fine.
Yeah. So I thought this was good. And like, I mean, if your goal is to get Damian Priest over, that's probably a good goal because we've seen, you know, for the past X amount of years, they're like, we're not interested in making new stars. We just want these guys to come back and beat up all the new guys. So like, hey, cool, you're trying to make new guys. Like, I'm always for that. So I thought for what it was fine. I mean, you need spectacle at WrestleMania. I'm a firm believer you do need celebrities at WrestleMania to make it like big and special and stuff. And this accomplished what it wanted to accomplish. So I mean, hard to fault them for that.
Yeah, and I'm one of those guys. I'm like you. I support having celebrities involved because I think if it's done correctly, it can add a lot of intrigue and excitement. And WrestleMania was built on that premise, quite honestly.
Yeah, absolutely. So we had our main event of night one. It was for the SmackDown's Women's Championship. It's Bianca Belair defeating Sasha Banks. So for me, this match started off on a bad foot, and I saw some other people say this, and they kind of got like crucified over it. And basically, like, can the women stop crying before matches? Like, I'm not like, I'm not saying like they can't be emotional. I understand it's a historic thing. I understand it's the two first African American women to main event WrestleMania. It's the first singles match to main event WrestleMania. It is objectively a historic match, but like, I mean, if you were in like a play or a movie or something, you'd have to like suck it up and play the character. And like, I don't have an issue with you like doing it later and like after you win, but I don't know. To me, it telegraphed the win. It makes it seem phony. I get it. None of it's real. I get that. But like for the moments we're watching the match, when you do that, you look like you're cooperating. And I don't know. It's like a lot of people reacted very poorly to people that said that, but I did not like that aspect. Nevertheless, I thought the match was fantastic. I still think, and I think she has been since 2013. Sasha's the best in-ring performer WWE has. I'm including Asuka. I'm including Kairi Sane. I think Sasha is like between the ropes, like just fantastic. Her selling, her offense, her character work, everything. I think she's so good. And I've always thought Bianca was very good, but Bianca has improved like by leaps and bounds. Top-notch match. I thought it was great. I thought it was the best. I thought it was better than the main event of the next night. Not that I didn't like that match, but I thought this was great. I thought it was a great way to end the show, and I thought they made Bianca Belair look like $1 million. I felt a little bad kayfabe for Sasha because she loses every big match she's ever had. But you know, like they're making a new star, so how are you going to complain?
Yeah, as for the crying thing, I know to play devil's advocate a little bit, I know it's a little hard to say, hey, keep your emotions in check, but it's, and this is going to sound a little callous, but it's kind of your job when you're a performance artist, right? To stay in character while you're doing it. So, and that stuff is very, very distracting whenever it does happen. So, I wouldn't know how to tell somebody not to do that, but at the same time, you should probably get that under control when you're in this situation, especially in a big main event spot like this. That said, I'm with you. I thought the match was really, really good. I like the basic contrast between the two girls, where Bianca is like this athletic freak of nature, but Sasha's like the crafty veteran that can like outsmart her. And it was like this.
It was Luger versus Flair.
That is a great comparison. Yes, that is a very good comparison. It's just this constant like cat and mouse game between the two, with Bianca eventually overpowering her and getting the win. So yeah, a really good main event to night one, and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's what they should have done with Luger and Flair. Eventually.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go into night two. So this show opened, and we had, for some reason, that weird Jack Sparrow opening. Did we have that on night one? I missed night one's opening. Did we have the same type of opening?
I believe the video package was the same. Yes.
Okay. Well, it was the weird, so we had them on both nights, so I just didn't see it the first time.
And anyway, did you see what happened on night one where there was a rain delay and they had to cut promos to stall for time?
No, I was like, we were moving, and or not, we weren't moving. My in-laws were moving, and we were helping them. So I'm like, you know what? I'll skip an hour of WrestleMania. I'll watch it later. And we started at 8:30 when the show actually started. So I by the time I got there, I hadn't missed anything.
Oh, very fortuitous. But yeah, it really goes to show like how heavily scripted everything in WWE is, that these guys and gals are unable to cut unscripted promos anymore. So it was very, very awkward, unfortunately.
You don't use the muscles, you lose them. So then
it makes me wonder if back in the day, like guys like Roddy Piper and Randy Savage, and then the Attitude Era guys like The Rock and Steve Austin, it's like they would have been able to fill that time easily.
Yeah. All right, so we had our first match, which was Randy Orton and The Fiend, which I thought.
Does this count as a match?
Yeah, well, last year he beat John Cena in like another dimension, and that counted and is on the Wikipedia page. So this has to count too. So it had a great video package. We had Orton come down to the ring, and by the way, it took 23 minutes before the match actually started, which was unacceptable. Orton comes down into the ring. Like, I think was he not stalling, because he went super slow. He was like pulling at like the guardrail. I feel like they were stalling because they were having some last minute production stuff with the Jack in the Box. I don't know, but that was my gut. And then
that's probably correct if I had to guess.
Yeah, and then the Fiend comes out. They do a thing for him. So I was very disappointed he didn't wrestle in like the melted Freddy Krueger outfit. Like,
that would have been cool, actually.
Yeah, because like they had him like appear in that on like after he came back from the burn. I thought but they just had him morph back to the Fiend, which like, oh, whatever, that's fine, you know. And then he comes out of that giant Jack in the Box. I thought that was awesome. I thought Alexa Bliss did it a little too slow, but that's classic Vince. He's always like, wait, yeah, just take your time with it. Like I don't know.
It looked like she was struggling with it.
Oh no, maybe, but I thought she was just like, oh, I'm going to like slow down and tell stories. I thought that's what it is. And it's like, I mean, there's telling stories and there's like just boring the shit out of me. So he comes out. I thought that was awesome. And then they have a 5-minute match, and Alexa Bliss is bleeding black blood, which was cool. And then Orton RKO's him with one RKO and pins him.
Yeah, I hated every minute of this. I'll be honest and blunt. The whole Alexa Bliss bleeding thing, it looked like, talking about production issues, it looked like whoever was controlling that device, either hit the button too hard or they didn't know how strong the device was, because it was just like gushing out of her. And credit to her for not breaking character at all, because I would have like lost my eyesight and freaked out at that point. But there was that aspect. There was the fact that the Fiend lost again.
Yep. After
in a big
this
match.
Is like his comeback.
Yeah, it made absolutely no sense. There's the fact that Orton looked absolutely miserable to be there. And that's one of the things about Randy Orton that you and I have always noticed. When he's not happy and he doesn't want to do something, it's painfully obvious. And it radiated off of him in this match, where he was like,
do you think he like didn't want to win or something? Like, what was he like? What was his deal?
I don't know. I think it was probably a combination of a bunch of things, where maybe he didn't like the story. Maybe there were production issues with all the different devices that they had, and that was something that was going on backstage and it pissed him off. Like, I don't know. I don't know.
you know, like there are a lot of people that do not like the Fiend. Like it's a very there's a work rate crowd that doesn't like the Fiend, and they're like, oh, his matches aren't very good, you know. Yeah, but like, I mean, the Undertaker had shitty matches for like 8 years. He had like terrible matches up until like 97, like late 97. He had bad, well, he had those Mankind matches, those were good, but like, you know, he for the most part always had bad matches, but people fucking loved him as a character. And like the Fiend is a similar situation where like after all the abuse that Bray has gotten like recently, like they did an amazing job in 2019, yeah, 2019, of building him up to be this godlike character that you believed could not be beaten. Like they would like Seth Rollins hit him with a million things, and like he like I mean that match sucked and that booking was, but they're like the idea is like the Fiend is not human. And then they had Goldberg beat him because they're like, oh, let's do Goldberg and Roman Reigns because okay, and and then they had Randy Orton beat him in that fire match, which I think is fine, but like I mean he's got to come back and kill him because like once again the upside is of this is oh Randy Orton is still the same guy he always is, and nothing ever. Randy Orton is Scott Hall. Nothing's going to happen if Randy Orton loses. It's going to be the same level he always is. He's going to be at that like upper tier kind of main eventer, but man, you know, not always. He's always going to be there. The Fiend depends on wins and losses, much like the Undertaker did. And I want to go back and like make a YouTube video of like the Undertaker with the Fiend's booking, like where Jimmy Snuka beats him one year and B. Brian Blair beats him one year, and like I don't know, like it's just like, Jesus Christ, this guy, he's lost to Randy Orton twice at Mania now.
Yeah, and I love the comparison to Undertaker because for the people that don't like the Fiend character, that like the purity of pro wrestling and don't like these over the top type characters, admittedly, going back with Undertaker, they did some like crazy, stupid stuff with him too, like early on in his career with some of the segments that they would do. And I remember being 5 or 6 years old when they did the bit with Jake Roberts in the cemetery with the Ultimate Warrior, and then there was the snake pit and all that other stuff. And it was just, as a kid, I was just baffled by it. I'm like, when are they going to get in the ring and wrestle or some shit? Yeah. Like, what am I watching right now? So they would do that stuff with Undertaker, but the biggest difference is Undertaker won a majority of the time. And when he lost, he lost the Tuesday in Texas match to Hogan, which was, you know, after he beat Hogan at Survivor Series. So that's basically
he got rolled up and thrown like the urn in his face. So
yeah, and then Hogan had to cheat to beat him too. And then Undertaker, I don't think he lost another match until like he inexplicably lost to Mabel in that King of the Ring tournament.
He did. That was it, I think. Yeah,
he lost the casting match to Yoko, but that was, again, it took an army to beat him. So it's like, when he would lose, it would be under like ridiculous circumstances. And that character was very heavily protected because they knew that he was a star attraction, and they captured that lightning in a bottle with the Fiend, and they decided to just say, fuck it, he can lose, it's fine.
They've captured it like 3 times with Bray. He went from like, he was like a spooky cult leader, they fucked that up. Then he became like a monster man, and then they fucked that up. Then he was a Fiend. Like they fuck it up every time.
It's unbelievable. It's kind of remarkable.
Yeah. And like, yeah, I mean, oh boy. All right, we got to keep moving through this. I don't want to talk about Nia Jax and Shayna Baszler against Natalya and Tamina. Do you?
I didn't think the match was that bad. Like, it was for a match I didn't care about. And I was expecting this match to be kind of a drag. I actually kind of enjoyed it. It was a nice, solid tag team match.
Yeah.
That's pretty much how I felt about it.
I thought Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn was good. I will say this, like, kudos to Logan Paul. Everybody seems to hate this guy, and I'm sure I do too, probably. But like, holy shit! Every time a celebrity comes on, they always have to like go over and be like the star, whatever. Logan Paul, everybody wanted to see him take a stunner, and he took a stunner, and like cool. You know, I'm glad you were able to do that because so many people come on and they have to be the babyface hero, and he was like, I understand people don't like me. I'm going to take a fucking stunner. I mean, if I'm WWE, we're paying you to be there. Just do what we say.
Yeah. I wish I was more familiar with Logan Paul so I would know why everybody wanted to hit him with the stunner, because I'm not overly familiar with him, but I'm an old man, so maybe that's why. The match itself, it was. I've seen that these two do much better with each other, so this just kind of felt like a pale imitation of what they'd done previously. But it wasn't bad.
What did you think of Sheamus for some reason beating Riddle?
This was baffling. The match itself wasn't bad, but I was like, we're still pushing Sheamus in 2021. Okay, sure.
Yep. We had a Nigerian drum fight between Apollo Crews and Big E for the Intercontinental Championship.
In the tradition of the Rest in Peace match, where we're just going to give a silly name to a no DQ match.
Or, hey, Patrick, don't forget about the Armageddon match.
Armageddon match, that one. Oh my
Undertaker
God.
had so many like fake matches that like kid version of me was like, I'm gonna fight. Like, oh man, Undertaker has all these matches. He's got the Rest in Peace match. That's a no disqualification match. What's the Armageddon match? I bet that's a no disqualification and count out match. Man, kids will try to justify fucking anything because I thought those matches were all different and they were not.
You are correct, good sir.
Kids are fucking stupid. We had Rhea Ripley versus Asuka.
I was disappointed in this.
Yeah. Rhea is someone who had the legs cut out of her very early. Like, she is somebody who could have been a major deal. I remember the only time NXT ever beat AEW was that December 19th show, and Rhea Ripley beat Shayna Baszler for the title. It was a big deal. And like, you're like, wow, she's a big deal. And then they have her lose to Charlotte at WrestleMania, and like Charlotte like left and stuff after. So it was like, what was the point? So like, I think Rhea Ripley, it's one of those situations where you're like, I mean, she's a big deal, but she could have been a much bigger deal if they had done it correctly.
Yeah, I agree with that. She was somebody who had like an interesting look and all this other stuff going for her. And then they just kind of like they do with a lot of people, they just halted her momentum, and her being in this match should have felt like a bigger deal than it did. And it didn't help that the match that they had was just kind of like, unfortunately, I've got to compare it to Sasha and Bianca, which I talked about. They had a very natural chemistry because physically the two were so different from each other. Here, I just felt like it was two kind of similar women doing moves to each other until Rhea won. And that was it.
Yep. Then we had our main event. Our triple threat match for the Universal title was Roman Reigns against Edge and Daniel Bryan. I thought the setup to this was really cool. I thought the promo package was great. I think Roman Reigns is like the coolest character, not the coolest character, but he's a really super cool character in WWE. It's amazing that it took like 5 years for them to be like, maybe he should be a heel. Like this, once again, this whole run proves that, like, I've seen so many things. I've seen people online say like, you have to have a top baby face. You do not fucking have to have a top baby face. Case in point, Roman Reigns. Roman Reigns actively drove viewers away from the company as a face, and now he has increased ratings for Smackdown. You do not need a top face. You need a top heel. Roman Reigns is a much better heel than a face. And guess what? After he gets over enough as a heel, guess what? You can turn him face and it'll be fine. Like, I never understood why they didn't just look at the Rock situation and be like, let's just continually do that. Like they've done it with a lot. AEW does it very well. Where like, Britt Baker was like a really shitty babyface, and no one liked her, and she was boring and awkward. And then they turned her heel, and then now she's gotten over huge, is a giant star now, and they're like, oh yeah, it's a classic wrestling thing. When people don't like the character, tweak it to go with what the people are thinking. So you're like, you're not trying to push that river in the other direction. So
it worked for Honky Tonk Man, for Christ's sake.
Yeah, I mean they used to do it all the time.
We all talk about like booking 101 and all this other stuff. I'm like, that's a pretty good trick to use. I'm just saying.
Yeah. So I thought this match was really good. I thought it ended the way it should have ended. A lot of people were really annoyed that a babyface didn't win and go as the triumphant hero, but like Edge is like, I don't know, what is he, 45, 48, I think, or something. Yeah. Daniel Bryan is like going to retire like any day now, seemingly. Roman Reigns is like 33. He's the most over thing the company has. Like, why would you take it off of him? Wait until you have somebody built up that you want to take it off of him. Like, whether that somebody is, I mean, I don't see anyone on the horizon, I'll be honest, but like theoretically WWE could create a new star one day, and then they should be the one to take it off Roman. But right now, like, what's the rush?
Yeah, and you and I have always been in favor of heels going over, and this is a perfect example of putting over a heel in the appropriate situations. Like, look, Edge doesn't need it, Daniel Bryan doesn't need it, Roman's hot right now. Just go with the hot hand. And we finally have a situation where Roman Reigns main evented a WrestleMania, and the match wasn't a disaster.
It's true.
It was actually a pretty good match, and him going over didn't make me want to vomit because it was like, good, keep it on.
And I thought the finish was really cool. I thought the pinning both. So the one problem I had with the finish was, and I liked the pinning both guys. I thought that was really cool and creative and awesome. Jey Uso gets like sent away, like, but then he factors into the finish at the end, and it's just like, I mean, you sent him away, so could we just have a clean finish? I'm not the guy who's like every match needs to have a clean finish, but like you sent the one guy away and then you brought him back. So it's just like I didn't like that.
One thing I don't know if they're going to bring this up, but one thing they could do for a potential Roman Edge match down the road, when Roman pinned them, he threw Edge on top of Daniel Bryan. And I'm kind of hoping that Edge brings it up where it's like, actually, I pinned Daniel Bryan.
Yeah,
so I should
interesting.
That would be I hope that somebody noticed that, because I think that could be a really interesting story to tell.
Yeah, because I honestly, it seems like Edge and Daniel Bryan is going to be the next main program coming up, which I don't know where that leaves Roman. Maybe Randy's not even a face, is he? Like, I have no idea. Maybe Kevin Owens. No, but he just wrestled him. I have no idea what they're going to do. Riddle? I don't know. Anyway, so yeah, that was WrestleMania. Night 1 really fun. Night 2 I thought was a bit lacking. Yeah.
Overall, though, solid viewing all around. I would say, I didn't love it, but I wasn't in misery while watching it.
No, I'm with you here. Okay, so we've taken up a lot of time with Godzilla and WWE. Let's go to AEW. Excuse me. The numbers came in. We'll talk about the show, but I want to talk about this first. The numbers came in for Wednesday Night Dynamite, and it was the biggest number in total audience that they've done since their opening show, and it was I want to say like the third biggest demo they've ever done. I think it was 0.44. It was a huge night, showing just how much NXT was siphoning off of AEW. Now, maybe this is a one-time thing. Maybe the NXT fans sampled it and they're not going to come back. But this wasn't a stacked show. This wasn't like Winter is Coming. It wasn't like what I think Blood and Guts will be in a few weeks. This was like a pretty normal show, I thought, and it got a huge number, and it really bodes super well for AEW going forward.
Yeah, it does. And I think the week before they did like their lowest number, and then they doubled it this week. It was crazy. So I don't know if, well, obviously NXT, which also saw an increase in viewership, and it's moved to Tuesdays.
Yep.
So it's like, and people have been saying it for almost the entire duration of the quote unquote Wednesday Night Wars. It's like both brands are kind of hurting each other, and NXT in particular is being used as a weapon to hurt AEW, and that feels dirty. And now you see the proof is in the pudding. When you don't have them on the same night, both brands actually are better off for it.
Yeah, there's this weird thing, and like I'm guilty of this, Patrick. Like, because in 2010 we thought maybe the situation with TNA and WWE would end up in a WCW, WWF type of way. But the Monday Night Wars was a unique beast. I don't think it'll ever happen again. And the conventional wisdom, which happened with TNA, well, I mean, TNA did see record ratings rise, but then they left very quickly. NXT and AEW were clearly siphoning the same type of fan from each other. And AEW, I'm sorry, in the Monday Night Wars, the audience just kept growing and growing. And like that was the aberration. The real thing is that it splits the audience. So we're seeing that now, and both companies, I mean, I know WWE would rather have no AEW than they would NXT successful, but both brands are going to be more successful now because of this. I also think Chris Jericho being on Steve Austin's podcast helped out a lot. I thought like people are like, I'm sure there were a few people that said, Chris Jericho, where's he been? AEW, and they Googled it and they checked it out. I think there were a few people that did that. Had to be.
Sure. I'm sure there was. And he gave a really good interview too. I really enjoyed listening to it. It was shocking to see an AEW guy on WWE programming, but yeah, I'm sure there were a few factors. I was also wondering, did the hype from Mike Tyson showing up the week before kind of spike viewers a little bit. Some people
maybe, but they didn't promote him much this week. Like the first stuff I saw for it was like the day before.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know. We'll see. Next week will be interesting. But yeah, so we have let's go through the show. What did you think of the show overall, Patrick?
I thought Dynamite was a fun show, pretty much start to finish. I wouldn't say I loved it, but it was generally entertaining all the way through.
Yeah, I think they're doing a good job of building new people up, which they have to. There's only so many like top names in wrestling. Jade Cargill continues to like be pushed as a major deal. Anthony Ogogo, who's been kind of like their development project for a while, got a nice debut that I really liked. I thought it was different and interesting. I mean, JR talks about it. Bill Watts used to get guys like that, but like, I love like when pro wrestlers are pro wrestlers and they come up, but like there is value to taking athletes from other walks of life and training them to be a pro wrestler.
Brock Lesnar
like
and Kurt Angle,
Lex Luger, Ernie the Big Cat Lad, Bronco Nagurski. There's Goldberg, The Rock. There's a lot of these guys that were not just I want to be a wrestler. They're other athletes, and there's a rhythm and there's a natural aptitude towards this type of thing that can work in a lot of cases. Now, there's a lot of bad ones too. I'm not saying like you should only do that, but like when Bill Watts would look for like Oklahoma football players, or JR would be like, I'm looking for like real athletes and stuff. JR loves football players, of course. There's a value to that. Like, and Anthony Ogogo is a Olympic bronze medalist in boxing, and there's a credibility there that works. And I thought he did pretty well in his first match.
It shocked me. That was the thing. And you and I have advocated for more squash matches, but the fact that he just knocked a dude out with one punch, I'm like, whoa, that's awesome. And right off the bat, it took this guy in the stable that I quite honestly don't really care about all that much with QT Marshall. And it just kind of took this guy who to me was kind of a blank slate, and it caught my attention. I was like, oh, maybe there's more to this guy than I thought.
Yeah. We had Jericho and Harwood, which I thought was a good match. I thought Mike Tyson's involvement made sense and was good. Wasn't
that punch
great.
He gave that looked good.
Oh yeah, no, he's and Cash sold it really well. It reminded me a lot of the Michaels one at 14.
Yeah. It that one looked a little bit more protected than this. Looked like a straight up shot, which again, he sold it really, really well. And I'm like, man, that looked really good.
Well, Jericho talked about in his book in 2010, like Tyson was fat and out of shape. And when he was like doing his jabs and practicing his punches, like Jericho's like, it was still one of the fastest things I could shape, like incoherent Mike Tyson. So you can imagine what Mike Tyson in his prime was like. So like, yeah, he's an old guy, but like there's power behind them fists.
Oh, for sure. He's the most dangerous man on the planet.
Yeah.
What are you going to do when Stone Cold gets in your way?
Yeah. I'm going to knock him the fuck out. Statlander came back. Chris Statlander had a great like she looked dominant. She looked great. Like AEW has gone from having the worst women's division to having a bunch of women stars that can conceivably carry the division. Like Britt Baker isn't even the champion, like they're so loaded right now.
Yeah, and they've got some more characters. They've got some new prospects like Jade Cargill and Red Velvet, who's kind of come on. It's like, oh, maybe there's more to her than I was thinking. And they've got some girls there. Now, Eva Lise just left under mysterious circumstances. But other than that, I mean, they've got Thunder Rosa, who's fantastic. They've got plenty of options.
Yeah. And then we had in our main event, we had Darby Allin and Matt Hardy. It's Darby Allin's weekly carry an old guy to a good match thing, where like Matt Hardy, who was like, I almost died in September, but guess what I'm gonna do? Jump off a fucking ladder. So that was smart. It was funny. I've been hearing CM Punk's voice in my head all week. he made this tweet where he's like, what bugs you in pro wrestling? And he's like, when people make that like can't believe it face after they hit a secondary move that never pins anyone. And I'm like, yep. And I saw Matt Hardy do that like 8 times in this match, and I'm like, holy shit. I mean, we're just feeding him to Darby, so I like fine, but like, oh god, just no more matches for this guy.
Yeah, the match itself was a 3-ring circus with all the interference and everything. And actually, the thing I popped the most for had nothing to do with Darby and Matt. It was the Lance Archer Sting situation, which
I thought that was so cool.
Yeah, that looked like, oh man, something about that just looked awesome. I don't know why, but it really caught my attention. And I wasn't a huge fan of Darby kicking out of like ridiculous match-ending stuff, like falling off the thing and still kicking out and all that shit. But generally, it was a fun match, and thank God Darby walked out with the belt. That's all I'll say.
Yeah. All right. So I think those are the major things. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, I think we're good.
All right. Cool. All right, guys. Ladies and gents, everyone who's listening, we really appreciate it, guys. Make sure you comment below. Make sure you like and subscribe. As always, comment and like on the Facebook page and share. All that stuff really does help. But yeah, we appreciate each and every one of you watching. Always want to hear what you have to say. So for myself, for my partner, Mr. Patrick Kelly, we are
signing off.